Hi everyone. I wanted to put together a brief overview video on a selection of Polish bayonets that I have in front of me here, which will kind of allow me to step through the various types of Polish bayonets that were in use by the Polish military between the years 1918 and 1939. Now, I know as we step through these, I'm going to be missing a couple of really hard to find examples. So for those, I'll try to at least describe them in detail and throw in a couple of photos that I pulled online to kind of give you guys a better idea of what they look like. Now, before we begin, I feel that this calls for a wardrobe change. Much better, I think. So, as we run through these bayonets here, I'm going to interject a little bit of Polish history to kind of provide a little bit of background behind some of these. Now, this history is going to be extremely watered down for brevity and simplicity. Otherwise, we're going to be here all day. So, to kind of put things into perspective here, let's get a basic understanding of the founding of the Polish Second Republic, which is when these bayonets came into pretty much existence. So, back in the late 1700s, the Kingdom of Poland ceased to exist following the partition of the country between the kingdoms of Russia, Prussia, and Austria. So ethnic Poles in these regions were divided up between these different kingdoms for about 120 years. So as you can imagine, during the course of World War I, there were ethnic Poles fighting on pretty much all sides of the conflict, as well as expat Polish volunteers outside of the country that fought as part of a Polish legion under the French military, famously referred to as Haller's Blue Army. Now, following the Treaty of Versailles after the armistice, Poland regained its independence again and became the Second Republic. So what I'm showing here is a map of the borders of the Second Republic of Poland. And as you can ascertain from the boundaries of the country, there was quite a spread of pool of arms available to equip the military of the new nation. There was quite a logistical nightmare here because there were all sorts of different types of calibers, types of ammunition, and what have you, that made it really kind of a quartermaster's nightmare. So at the beginning, Poland really had to make do with whatever was left over from World War I within its borders. And our first bayonet that we're going to be taking a look at here is exact product of the sort of melting pot of arms, so to speak. All right, so the first bayonet up for discussion here is the Polish Wz-2693, which is a Polish issue of a French Lebel 8693 bayonet. So you might be asking yourself, well, how did a French bayonet of this nature become equipped by the Poles? Well, as I mentioned before, there was a Polish legion operating under French authority during World War I, and they were equipped with French arms like the Lebel rifle, and they had the corresponding bayonets issued to them as well. And they were denoted by the Polish model system of identification, which is the use of the abbreviation WZ for wzór, which translates into model. Alright, so the type that I have in front of me here is of the first type with a elegant looking non-removable nickel-silver handle. It's got a 20.5 inch long cruciform type blade. It's got a hooked quillion over here, and it's got a round press stud for affixing it to the bayonet stud of the Lebel rifle. Now over here on the pommel, it is stamped WZ86/93, which corresponds to the Lebel 1886 rifle model adoption year and the 1893 improvement modifications. Now, I have seen later examples of the 86/93 bayonet from, I think it was like later on in the wartime production, that has a more simple style of bayonet release button over here it's got a brass grip instead of this really nice looking silver nickel type material grip. It's got the omission of the hooked quillion because, well, guess what? It was discovered that in World War I, bayonet fencing in the trenches really wasn't a thing in reality. And the blade is a much shorter length, and this is likely for modernization purposes and saving on material that could be used elsewhere, as it was considered that shorter, handier bayonets were a lot more practical, had reduced weight, and are less prone to snapping. And obviously the nickel and the other raw materials were kind of needed elsewhere in the war effort. So, unfortunately, I don't have a French Lebel rifle in my collection, but I'm pretty sure you can find plenty of other types of videos that will show how this type of bayonet fits onto those rifles. Now, I am getting a little bit ahead of myself here, but following the adoption of the Mauser 98 system of rifles by the Polish military, a majority of the foreign rifle patterns, like for example this Lebel one, was exchanged or sold off to other countries. And just for the record, I wanted to point out that there are some references out there that indicate that there were over 100,000 French rifles still in Polish inventory. I think it was around the year 1938, but just note that that was kind of the minority. There was, predominantly Polish Mausers in their inventory. All right, so continuing on with the trend of foreign bayonets in Polish service, this one should look very iconic to many of you, especially anyone that's interested in Imperial German weaponry. This is a Polish rework of a German S98/05 butcher blade bayonet. Very cool, huh? So as far as the development of this bayonet goes, I'm not really going to go into those details. There are plenty of other good YouTube channels out there that kind of go into this level of detail, like the perfectly named Imperial German Bayonets channel. So as you can imagine, there were loads of these things left over in Polish borders after the end of World War I. And also some were captured in some of the border conflicts that occurred during, the Weimar period in Germany. So these were typically used by the Polish military until domestic production of bayonets was started. Okay, taking a closer look at the Polish Wz-9805 bayonet. So for comparison purposes, I have two Imperial German 9805 bayonets here for comparison. To compare to this Polish 9805 rework. So up top here I've got a sawback Erfurt, very cool, and X sawback made by, let's see, Simpson, Co. and Sul, and of course our Polish WZ98 over here. So the WZ98 bayonet has Polish beechwood material grips with 7 grooves, as you can count here. Although there are some examples I've seen that have smooth replacement grips as well, rather than having these slots over here. Now, if you compare this one to the two German examples that I've got here, obviously the wood material is different, and you could see that the German ones have a greater number of grooves that extend past the rear grip screw, whereas the Polish one does not. So taking a closer look here at the ricasso of the Polish 9805, this was made by WKC in Solingen. I'm not going to try to embarrass myself by attempting to produce the German name, but as you can see, it has been completely refinished and reblued. I'm not sure if this was done by Germany under the Weimar Republic refurbishment program in 1920, or if this was done in Poland at this time, because typically the Polish versions of these are shown in the white rather than being blued. So Polish bayonets are typically marked WZ98 or WZ98/05 over here on the pommel. This one's kind of really faint and hard to see.
As you can see here, the blade is an X sawbacked, as it has the dipped profile as to where the sawback used to be before it was ground off. There is no flash guard, as you can see here on the grip, as this was fitted to the long rifles and not intended to be used on any carbines. There's a 517 over here on the Ricasso, and the Scabbard has a matching 517 serial number. I'm not sure if that's coming through there. There is a 9140 that has been scratched off and canceled over here on the pommel, which was likely done when it was refurbished by the Poles. And yeah, the Scabbard comes with a beautiful leather Polish Wz-31 frog, which should look very similar to an Imperial German one for 9805.
So these really cool big long bayonets were fitted to the Polish WZ-98 long rifle, as well as any captured Imperial German Gewehr 98s that were pressed into service. Now, I don't have a WZ-98 to show you, but I do have a German Gewehr 98, which will fit the bill for demonstration purposes here. So yeah, this is a 1900 Mauser Oberndorf with the classic Lange Visier roller coaster sights here. So we'll just kind of throw this at the end here. There you go. Fits perfectly. Now, continuing on with a little bit of Polish military history, the Polish Arms Council of 1921 decided to adopt the Mauser 98 system as the backbone armament for soldiers in the Polish military. Now, part of this decision kind of is based on the impressive performance of the Mauser 98 system of rifles in World War I, but it also had a lot to do with the fact that Poland had the fortune of obtaining the Mauser rifle production in the former Imperial German Royal Arsenal in Danzig, which is now known as Gdańsk in Poland, under the provisions of the Versailles Treaty. Now, thanks to this, Poland was able to start producing Mauser rifles domestically to arm itself, and then eventually was able to produce them for export overseas for additional money. Now, starting in 1922, Poland began producing domestic Mausers for their military, starting with the long rifle WZ-98, which, as I mentioned before, is essentially a copy of the Imperial German Gewehr 98. So, as such, domestic bayonets were soon also requested, rather than the reuse of captured Imperial German Gewehr 9805 bayonets. So with the start of domestic rifle production in Poland in the 1920s, Poland really didn't have any arsenals producing bayonets because none of the factories were really tooled up for it. So they had some teething issues at the beginning.
Alright, taking a closer look at the WZ-22. Let's get it out of the scabbard here. So typically on these WZ-22 bayonets, they're marked WZ-22 on the pommel for identification. However, this one does not have that on there. On the Ricasso, it's marked ZBR4 or Zbrojownia number 4, which is Armory number 4, and that's in Kraków. Note that there are earlier examples of these WZ-22 bayonets that have this marking flipped upside down here, and that was done in the Austrian fashion. And instead of having the serial number here on the blade, they would have it here on the crossguard, which is a lot easier to do than stamping it directly on the blade. So this one over here is in the German fashion with the blade down. On the other side of the Ricasso here, we've got the Polish eagle up top. There you go. With WP for Wojsko Polskie or Polish Army. As you can see, there's no flash guard on these. Mounting point is very similar to that of the 9805s. All in all, not a bad looking first attempt at a bayonet. The scabbard over here for the Wz-22 is the typical kind of Austrian Type 95 scabbard with a typical Austrian type frog. These were typically painted green, but I think you can tell that this one looks like it was painted black at some point, and most of the paint has been rubbed off, though the frog is intact and in its original configuration. There are a couple of markings over here on the frog stud that I'm not really able to make out, so if anyone knows about these in more detail and can kind of identify what these kind of signify, please let me know.
As you can imagine, these Wz-22 bayonets didn't really last too long and were eventually replaced with the Wz-22, which we will be discussing next. So the next bayonet that Poland produced was the Wz-24 bayonet, which is shown here, which is a improved version of the Wz-22. Now these were pretty much all made by the company named Perkun, which is, the full name is Wz24 Bayonet Perkun S.A. w Warszawie, which translates into Motorcycle Factory Perkun in Warsaw, which was a private company that predominantly made small displacement motorcycles in Warsaw, as well as some other equipment like, I think, farm implements and such. But they also got into the business of making bayonets for the Polish military, taking on this contract as well as some other small arms contracts later on. So the Wz-24 bayonet was made to fit the small ring Polish Mauser 98 carbine, which I have over here. This is a PFK Warszawa 1927, and this is a pretty much Polish copy of the Imperial German Karabiner 98 AZ or Karabiner 98A, whatever you want to call it, that's fine. And these were simply denoted by the K98 on the receiver, and a lot of American collectors typically refer to this as the Polish K98. So if you compare this rifle to a Imperial German Kar 98A or AZ, they're very much kind of similar. There are some minor details, but we won't go into the specifics here. You can check out videos by CN Arsenal or Forgotten Weapons if you want more details on that. So for these new rifles, Poland needed a new bayonet. So the Wz-24 stepped in, and these Wz-24 bayonets do have a flash guard fitted at the top here near the grips. And these were predominantly designed for the carbines because, as you can tell, when you mount them on the rifle, the muzzle end of the carbine is right at where the grips are, and there's a good video by CN Arsenal which kind of describes illustrates the effect here, where as the muzzle blast shoots out of the muzzle end of the rifle, it would blow out these wood grips on the rifle. So the flash guard, as it's added here, helps to preserve the condition of the grips.
Alright, so for comparison purposes here, I've got the Wz-24 down here at the bottom and the Wz-22 up here at the top. And let's kind of do a little side-by-side comparison here. Hopefully you guys can tell from taking a look at this, but the Wz-24 definitely has a chunkier blade than the Wz-22. So it's definitely a lot stronger. And kind of taking a look at the kind of mounting slot on these rifles, the Wz-24 definitely has a lot more material and is a lot more, I guess, robust and less prone to breaking. Taking a close-up of the markings here on the pommel, it's marked Wz-24, obviously for identifying the model of the bayonet. So a defining feature of these bayonets is a completely round press stud with no slot markings like German bayonets typically have. You'll see that there is a Polish eagle here under the grip. It's a little hard to make out, but there it is. On the right ricasso over here, on the right ricasso, it's stamped with the manufacturer Perkun. Let's see if I can get that in better view. Yeah, there you go, Perkun. And the bayonet serial number, which is really hard to make out, but it's roughly there. The markings from here on out continue with the German stamping system with the text orientation with the kind of blade down, so to speak. Additionally, there are two letters in a geometric shape you'll see over here and over here, and that's on all these Wz-24 bayonets. One of these corresponds to the inspector of a particular factory. In this case, it's this triangle M over here. And that's kind of the inspector of the Perkun Corporation for where the bayonet was made. And the other stamp over here, which looks like it looks like an oval with a K in the middle, and that corresponds to the Polish military acceptance stamp. So if you have one of these bayonets, you'll kind of notice that the markings over here kind of are mixed. You know, they might vary between different types of Perkun bayonets, but they all typically follow the same fashion. So that's kind of a neat thing to look out for and collect. And then flipping it over on the other side of the ricasso, once again we have our Polish eagle and WP. Now, Perkun-made scabbards are also marked with the letter and geometric shape with matching serial number on either the frog stud over here or at the top of the scabbard. Now, originally these were painted in black, but these were repainted after 1936 in this sort of khaki greenish color. As you can see in this example, it's not really matching to the bayonet because obviously there's no serial number on this particular one. And as far as the Perkun acceptance marking over here, let's see, it looks like a hexagon with a D in it, so this doesn't match the triangle M of the bayonet. However, as you can imagine, when these were put into service with the Polish military, over time the bayonets and their scabbards were often exchanged, misplaced, and what have you. So having matching serial numbers on the bayonets and the scabbards is somewhat rare. And, you know, obviously this wasn't a big concern during their military use at the time, so they didn't have collectors of these bayonets in mind when they were kind of putting these things together. So if you have one with matching serial numbers, great. That's a pretty rare treat to have.
So yeah, the construction of these bayonets was definitely an improvement over the WZ-22s. However, it was noted in some reports that these bayonets did need individual fitting to the rifles, where if you kind of mix and match bayonets to the rifles, sometimes there were fitment issues. So a slight improvement in the WZ-24 bayonets came in the form of the WZ-27, which I unfortunately don't have a copy of because these are extremely rare and difficult to find. They were just very shortly produced, and they're very similar to the WZ-24 bayonets. The only really modification there is to have kind of a wider bayonet mounting slot over here so that they could be easily mounted and dismounted off of any type of rifles where it's a carbine or the long rifle. And it was kind of meant to be like a universal bayonet that could be swapped, you know, between the different types of rifles in Polish military. The only real way to distinguish them between a WZ-24 and a WZ-27 is just a marking over here on the pommel. So next we have the Wz-28 Bayonet, which was designed and produced in conjunction with the new Polish rifle, the Wz-29. And this is a short rifle, not nearly as long as the Gewehr 98, and as you can tell, this is very, very similar to the Wz-24 rifle manufactured by the Czechs. So this variant of bayonet was fitted with a muzzle ring, as you can see over here, as the positioning of the bayonet stud on the rifle of the Wz-28 was a lot further back than that of the carbine version, which added some added stability for mounting the bayonet. Now, curiously, this bayonet is fitted with a flash guard, even though it makes no sense, because when this bayonet is mounted to this rifle here, there's absolutely no chance for a muzzle blast to affect the grips on this rifle. But I don't know, it was it was still produced in this fashion.
All right, taking a closer look at the Wz-28. Let's get it out of the scabbard. So the crossguard over here is a lot thinner than that of the Wz-24. And as you can see here, the serial number is now on the crossguard here instead of on the blade. Or I'm sorry, on the ricasso. And let's see, there is no Wz-28 over here on the pommel. But yeah, the stampings over here for the Perkun Corporation are very similar to the Wz-24. We've got our military acceptance mark here, the rectangle with H, and the triangle M over here. Now, yeah, and the Polish Eagle and WP on the other side here. Again, here's that flash guard that we talked about, and our muzzle ring. Now, for some reason, this one has a notch cut in it. I'm not sure what the purpose of that is. Again, we have a little Polish Eagle here on the other underside of the grips. Unfortunately, the bayonet stud here, or I'm sorry, the push button here is kind of stuck, and I'm not able to get that fully opened out. Now, I don't have a Polish scabbard for this, as though this is a World War II German S-84-98 scabbard. I think it does have like some Waffen-Amps over here, which is kind of interesting. Yeah, there we go. But it fits the Wz-28 bayonet perfectly.
So these bayonets were only made by Perkun for a short period of time, as Fabryka Broni in Radom started to become Poland's premier arsenal for arms production in Poland, and the manufacture of bayonets was really shifted there. Now, I don't have an example of a FB Radom produced Wz-28 bayonet, but for the most part, I've heard that these bayonets are of much better quality in terms of fit and finish than the earlier Perkun versions, and hopefully you see the photos that I'm throwing up here. Alright, so concluding with the Wz-28, there was a later version of this bayonet that's also extremely rare and hard to find, which obviously I don't have another copy of, and these are very, very similar to the Wz-28s, except they removed the flash guard because, hey, they eventually figured out they don't need it for fitting this type of bayonet onto the rifle that it's designed for. I believe that these were exclusively produced by FB Radom, but I could be mistaken. So yeah, with the new decade on the horizon came the need for a new bayonet. So this next bayonet that I have here for display is the Wz-29 or Wz-30. I'm not sure what the correct designation is, but for American collectors, they typically refer to this as the Mobilization model, which is really kind of an updated version of the Wz-28 bayonet. This was once again made to fit the Wz-29 short rifle and the Wz-98 style of long rifle. Now, you might be asking yourself, well, why is the Wz-98 rifle coming back at this time? Well, I'm sure it's a widely debated topic now in kind of retrospect, But in the mid-1930s, for some reason, the Polish military doctrine shifted their small arms strategy back on super long rifles like the Gewehr 98, and for some reason began producing those Gewehr 98 Polish reworks, now fitted with tangent sights and some other small improvements, and it was designated as the WZ98A.
Alright, so we'll take a closer look at the mobilization bayonet here. As you can see, there is no flash guard over here protecting the grips, since, you know, this is going to be mounted on a WZ29 or a WZ98A, so there is no concern for any muzzle blast damaging the grips here. These do also have, just like the WZ28, a muzzle ring for some extra stability when these are mounted on the rifle. And we'll take this out of the scabbard. And as you can see here, this is marked Perkun, the manufacturer, and Warszawa, the location that it was made. And these are typically found either marked Perkun or FB Radom. And as you can see on the back here, it's dated 1939 with a Polish eagle. And these are referred to by collectors as the mobilization model bayonet, as they're all 1939 dated. Now, the reason for that is because starting in 1939, Poland was going to start dating bayonets on the Ricasso by the year of production, and obviously since Germany invaded Poland on September 1st, 1939, no other dated versions of the bayonet were produced, like, 1940 and so forth. Now, typically, in most cases, bayonets are issued unsharpened, but all of these bayonets are issued sharpened from the factory. And let's see if I can get this in focus here. So yeah, you'll notice like halfway down the blade, it starts becoming sharpened over here. Now, yeah, this blade is, it's got a bright metal finish, and the grip screws or bolts here are blued, which is, a nice extra touch. Kind of going back over to the crossguard, you'll see the serial number is marked on there, just like on the WZ28. And then, similarly to the WZ24 bayonets, we've got the two different types of markings here. We've got a military acceptance mark. It's a B7 in an oval on the Ricasso, and it looks like another letter in a really deep stamp, and that's going to be the Perkun factory acceptance marking. Yes, we have a Polish eagle over here underneath the grips. And this example comes with a unmarked, unserialized Polish scabbard. It's looks like it's completely blued.
Example, FB Radom also produced these bayonets, and again, these are noted to be of much higher quality than the Perkun versions, and they were given a parkerized finish to help protect against corrosion. That being said, the Perkun bayonets, like this one here, are typically known to be scarcer, because I think less of them were produced. So yeah, additionally there were some very late production versions of this mobilization bayonet that were produced by FB Radom that were missing several of the markings here on the Ricasso, as they were previously rejected by the inspectors in production for not being up to FB Radom acceptance standards, maybe as a means to not sour the reputation of the arsenal if they were ever issued. However, with war looming on the horizon in 1939, they were kind of brought into service and rushed out to equip the Polish troops once it was pretty evident that war was, just a matter of time. So as you can imagine, after the invasion of Poland by Nazi Germany in 1939, many models of Polish Mauser rifles were kind of inspected by the occupiers and found to be, hey, these are these are pretty good rifles. We can, definitely use them for the war effort. So a lot of those were kind of pressed into service, given, new inspection markings with Waffenamts and kind of redesignated by the inspectors and sent out to like equip rear echelon troops, or basically like anyone but the Wehrmacht. So along with those rifles, some of the Polish bayonets found their way into German issue as well. So this work typically involved removing any sort of muzzle rings that were on the bayonets. Like, for example, if they were a Wz-24 Bayonet, that muzzle ring was shaved off. So the bayonets themselves typically were re-blued, including the blades and any parts that were typically in the white by the Poles. So the grips and the screws were reworked, as well as the bayonet stud button typically was changed to the slotted version like the one you can see here. And they may also have German Waffenamt acceptance marks on them. So I have only one of these examples in my collection here. This is a German rework of a Polish Wz-24 bayonet. And what I think is curious is they still maintain the WP for Wojska Polsku and keep the Polish eagle here on the Ricasso, which I thought was kind of interesting. But yeah.
All right, so we'll take a closer look at the German captured Wz-24 bayonet. As you can see, it's still marked Wz-24 on the pommel. The bayonet stud button has been replaced with a slotted one of a German style. We've got the blued grip screws. We've got a serial number here on the scabbard. And it matches the serial number on the blade. Note that there is a different number over here on the cross guard, which I'm not sure what that corresponds to. Again, we have the Perkun manufacturer over here with the serial number, as well as an acceptance mark over here. Curiously, as I've mentioned before, they maintained the WP for Polish Army and left the Polish eagle intact. So yeah, the entire blade has been blued by the Germans when it was reissued. Although I don't see any Waffenamts anywhere on this.
So I hope this video was useful to any collectors out there that have an interest in these Polish bayonets, as there really isn't too much out there in the English language right now on YouTube. And if I got any information or facts wrong, please let me know in the comments to help anyone else watching this video in the future to make sure they get the correct factual information. I will be sharing in the credits section here any of the other YouTube channels or internet pages where I've extracted some of this information to kind of formulate this video. So once again, thanks everyone for making it through the end of the video, and thanks for watching.